Gordon Ramsay told Keanu Reeves to put on an apron and prove he belonged in the kitchen, in front of 16 professional chefs and a dining room that had not heard silence like that in 11 years of service. Not as a joke, not as a bit for a camera crew, because Keanu had said something Gordon found intolerable, quietly, at a corner table, in a way that Gordon was not supposed to hear. And Gordon was the kind of man who responded to intolerable things in one specific way. He responded in the kitchen. "If you think it is that simple," Gordon said, the words just loud enough to reach every station, "then prove it." Keanu looked at him for a moment. Worn jeans. A dark jacket he had not taken off. No expression that read as surprise. "All right," he said. What happened in the next 45 minutes did not make sense to anyone who witnessed it, including Gordon Ramsay. And what Gordon did the following morning, before the dining room opened, before any of his staff arrived, was something he had not done in 31 years of professional cooking. He picked up the phone and apologized. There is a restaurant on West Randolph Street in Chicago called Ember and Salt. It opened in 2009 in a space that had previously been a print shop, and it kept the bones, exposed brick the color of dried clay, iron ceiling beams painted black, a floor of reclaimed Douglas fir that had been there since 1941. The kitchen is open, separated from the dining room by a low steel counter, and nothing else. You can watch every plate leave the pass. On a full Saturday service, you can hear the tickets printing, the burners cycling up, the particular flat crack of a pan deglazed with white wine. The dining room holds 62 covers. A table requires 6 weeks to book under normal circumstances, and longer than that for the chef's counter, which seats 8 and costs $310 per person before wine. Gordon Ramsay did not own Ember and Salt. He did not operate it. He was in Chicago for 4 days to film a segment for a production company and had taken the evening off, and a friend who knew the chef, a woman named Patricia Hong, who had staged under Gordon in London 11 years earlier, and whose food Gordon respected in the specific way he respected very few things, had made a call. He arrived at 7:15. Dark trousers, a gray-fitted shirt, no jacket. A small reservation card at the host stand with a single name written in ink. The maitre d', a man named Ellis, who had worked the front of house for 6 of the restaurant's 14 years, recognized him before he reached the stand and had the composure to give no indication of it. Gordon sat at a table for 2 near the south wall, close enough to the pass that he could see the plating, but not so close that he was in the sight line of the kitchen staff. He ordered the tasting menu. He ordered a glass of the Alsatian Riesling. He sat with his back straight and watched the room and did not look at his phone. The reservation next to him, the small corner table angled toward the window, was seated 15 minutes later. A man in worn jeans and a dark jacket, no tie, baseball cap he removed when he sat down. He came alone. He studied the menu without urgency, the way someone reads something they are genuinely interested in rather than performing interest in. He ordered from a young server named Cora, the 7-course, the mineral water, and a question about the sourcing of the lamb that Cora answered fully and that the man listened to with complete attention. Gordon noticed him the way Gordon noticed everything in a dining room. Then he returned to his food. It was not until the 3rd course that he heard the remark. The remark was not directed at Gordon. It was not even directed loudly. The man at the corner table had been joined briefly by a friend, another man, someone who moved through the restaurant the way people move when they are not entirely comfortable in expensive rooms, and they were talking in the low register of people who do not want to be the loudest table. The friend said something about the food, something complimentary and slightly disbelieving. the particular surprise of a person who does not usually eat in places like this, discovering that the surprise was warranted. The man at the corner table said, "It is not the complexity that makes it extraordinary. It is the restraint." Anyone can add. The question is what you are willing to leave out. He said it the way someone says a thing they have thought about for a long time. Quietly, with no expectation that anyone beyond the table would hear it. Gordon heard it. He set down his fork. The statement was not wrong. That was the problem. It was precisely, irritatingly correct, stated by a man who was eating his third course and had not, as far as Gordon could determine, spent 31 years earning the right to say it. Gordon had spent 31 years earning the right to say it. He had burned through 2 marriages, a stress fracture in his right foot that had never healed properly, and the accumulated pressure of 3 Michelin stars to arrive at exactly that understanding. And here was a man in worn jeans saying it over the lamb, calmly, between courses, as if it had simply occurred to him. Gordon looked at the table, looked at the man. The cap was back on. The dark jacket. Something about the face that Gordon recognized with a delay, the way you recognize something you were not expecting to see in a context where it does not belong. He pushed back his chair and walked to the corner table. Gordon Ramsay's reputation preceded him into every room he entered. This was not vanity. It was logistics. He was 6'2", broad across the shoulders in the way that 30 years of professional kitchens produce, with a face that had been photographed more often than most faces, and a voice that could carry through a full Saturday service without being raised. People reacted to him. They registered him. The maitre d' at the front of house that evening had managed a neutral expression for approximately 4 seconds. The man at the corner table looked up when Gordon stopped beside it and gave him the same attention he had given Cora when she explained the lamb sourcing. "I heard what you said," Gordon said, "about restraint." The man waited. "Do you cook?" Occasionally, Gordon looked at him. "Then come into the kitchen." It was not phrased as an invitation. Gordon's challenges were never phrased as invitations. They were phrased as the only reasonable response to a statement that required demonstration rather than discussion. The man at the corner table was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at his friend, who had gone very still in the way people go still when they realize that something is happening and they are not entirely sure what. "What would you like me to cook?" the man said. "Whatever you think demonstrates restraint," Gordon said. "You have whatever is on the line." Patricia's prep. Her pantry. 45 minutes. The man nodded once. "All right." He stood up. He was taller than Gordon had registered from across the room. He followed Gordon toward the kitchen without adjusting his jacket or his pace, the way someone follows a direction they have accepted rather than one they are performing acceptance of. At the pass, Patricia Hoeing looked up from the ticket rail. She was 44 years old, with 17 years of professional kitchens behind her and the particular calm of a chef who has earned the right to be calm. She looked at Gordon. She looked at the man beside him. Something crossed her face. The same delayed recognition. The same recalibration. "Patricia," Gordon said, "we need an apron." Patricia reached under the pass without a word and came up with a folded white apron. She looked at the man. The man said, "Thank you." He tied it with the practiced knot of someone who had done it before and moved toward the line. Gordon Ramsay grew up in Stratford-upon-Avon, in a household that the word difficult does not adequately describe. His father was a failed footballer who moved the family 7 times before Gordon was 16, and who spent the years in between drinking heavily and filling whatever space he occupied with a kind of ambient menace that Gordon could not, as a child, fully name and could not, as an adult, entirely leave behind. His mother held the household together with the specific tensile strength of women who have no margin for anything else. Gordon cleaned his own clothes at 13. He cooked dinner at 14 because nobody else was going to. He was a decent footballer himself, good enough that it felt, for 2 years between 16 and 18, like it might be the shape of his future. Then a knee injury at 18, the kind that does not fully heal and does not let you forget it healed imperfectly, ended that particular possibility. He turned to cooking the way some people turn to the only door left open, not because it was his first choice, but because he was good at it. And being good at something when everything else had contracted to very little is not a small thing. He staged under Marco Pierre White in London at 21. Marco was demanding in ways that Gordon had been trained by his father to interpret as the grammar of high-expectation environments, which meant he did not quit when others quit, and he did not flinch when others flinched, and he learned at a pace that Marco, who was not generous with observations about anyone's pace, eventually acknowledged. 3 stars came. Then the television. Then the version of Gordon Ramsay that most of the world knew. The volume, the precision, the visible contempt for imprecision, the face that had been on more magazine covers than he could account for. What most people who watched the television version did not see was what happened in the kitchen after service. After the cameras were off and the dining room was empty and the brigade was breaking down their stations, Gordon would walk the pass alone and stand in the quiet and think about what had been right and what had been wrong and how to close the distance between them. He had been doing this for 31 years. He had never once found the distance fully closed. The thing about restraint, about the idea that excellence was what you chose not to include, was a thing he had learned only late. It had come to him in his mid-40s, after his 3rd star in London, when he had stood over a plate he had cooked for himself late on a Thursday night, and realized that every element on it was correct, and the plate was somehow exhausting to look at. He had taken 3 things off. The plate became a different object. He had stood there for a long time. He had never said this out loud in a professional context. He had applied it and never named it. And then a man in worn jeans at a corner table had named it, casually, between courses, as if it were simply a thing one noticed. The kitchen went quiet when the man stepped behind the line, not the theatrical quiet of a kitchen reacting to a camera. The involuntary quiet of 16 people who have been working in close proximity at high volume and have suddenly, without agreement, decided to attend to something else. He stood at the center of the line for a moment and looked at what was in front of him. The mise en place. The burners. The cold section. He looked at it the way you look at a problem you are deciding whether to solve with speed or with care. He chose care. He asked Patricia, quietly, where she kept the shallots. She pointed. He found them. He looked at the pantry shelf for approximately 40 seconds, the kind of looking that involves actual inventory, not browsing, and came back to the station with 4 things. Shallots. A small bunch of thyme, a container of Patricia's reduced veal stock, which he opened and smelled before setting down. Unsalted butter, a full block. He started with the shallots, knife technique that was not showy and was not imprecise, the particular competence of someone who had done this enough that it was no longer a conscious act. Gordon watched from the end of the pass. He said nothing. Beside him, Patricia had stopped pretending to look at the ticket rail. The man built a sauce. It took 31 minutes. He did not deviate. He did not improvise for its own sake. He did not reach for things that were not already on his station. He used the reduction and the shallots and the thyme and the butter and a splash of the Riesling from Patricia's half-open bottle on the cold shelf, which he asked permission for before he took it. Patricia said yes. He used 2 tablespoons. When it was done, he plated it over a small portion of the heritage carrots from Patricia's prep, 3 of them, halved, roasted, and set the plate on the pass. He untied the apron. He folded it. He set it on the edge of the counter where he had found it. He looked at Gordon. He said, "I left out the cream." He said it the way someone states a fact they are not asking to be evaluated. Then he walked back to the corner table, sat down, and resumed his meal. The kitchen was still quiet. Gordon looked at the plate on the pass. He picked up a spoon. He tasted the sauce. He set the spoon down. He looked at the plate for a long time. Patricia said, very quietly, "Yes, that was all." Gordon did not walk back to the corner table. He did not stand in the dining room and make a speech about what he had just witnessed. He returned to his own table and finished his tasting menu and paid his bill and left before the man at the corner table had reached his final course. He sat in the back of the car to his hotel and was quiet for the entire ride, which his assistant, who had been traveling with him for 4 years and had developed a precise taxonomy of Gordon's silences, recognized as a different kind than the others. Back in his room, Gordon stood at the window for a while and thought about the plate. Not about who the man was. He knew by then. He had known from the 3rd course of his own meal, which was around the same time he had made the decision to walk over to the corner table. What he thought about was the sauce, the 4 ingredients and the restraint and the particular quality of the finished thing, which was not simple in the way amateur food is simple but specific in the way that only clarity produces. He thought about the cream, about leaving it out, about how the sauce had a brightness, an edge. That cream would have smoothed into something rounder and less honest. He thought about a kitchen in London in 1993 and a plate he had made for himself and the 3 things he had removed. He thought about 31 years and the distance. He picked up his phone. It was late. He dialed anyway. Patricia Hong picked up after 3 rings. She was still in the restaurant. She was always still in the restaurant at this hour on a Saturday, breaking down the fish station herself the way she had done every Saturday for 14 years. The habit of a chef who did not trust what she could not verify. Gordon said, "I owe you an apology." Patricia was quiet for a moment. For what? For walking into your kitchen and putting a stranger behind your line without asking. She was quiet again. Gordon could hear the sound of a container being sealed. "He asked permission before he touched the Riesling," she said. "I know." "Did you taste the sauce?" "Yes." A pause. "Then we're fine," she said. Gordon said, "The carrots were right, 2, 3, not 2, not 4. 3, I know," Patricia said. "I counted them." Gordon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You staged under me for 2 years. I never told you this. The restraint thing, that you learn at last, that it takes longest. I should have told you that when you were in my kitchen and I didn't, and you built your own kitchen and found it anyway, and I came in here tonight and took credit for the lesson in front of your brigade." The sound of another container. Then Patricia said, "Gordon." "What?" "I know. I've known for about 12 years. A pause. "But thank you for saying it." Gordon hung up the phone. He stood at the window for a while longer. The city below him was Chicago at midnight. The specific, indifferent energy of a city that does not require your acknowledgement to continue operating. He thought about the man at the corner table. He thought, "You have to earn the quiet. That is the thing nobody tells you at the beginning. 30 years to earn the quiet." He thought, and then somebody walks in wearing worn jeans, and just has it already. He did not know what to do with that. He went to sleep. The story made its way around the food industry the way stories in the food industry travel, not through press, not through social media, but through the specific oral tradition of people who work in kitchens and talk to people who work in other kitchens and pass things along in the way of a guild. Patricia told her sous chef. Her sous chef told his girlfriend, who was a pastry chef at a hotel downtown. Ellis, the maitre d', told his sister over dinner 2 weeks later, when the story had settled enough that he could tell it without it feeling like a breach of something. Cora, the young server who had explained the lamb sourcing, wrote 3 sentences about it in a journal she kept and did not post anywhere. The version that circulated was not always precise. Some tellings had the challenge issued more aggressively. Some had the kitchen staff applauding, which had not happened. The kitchen had simply gone back to work after a moment, which was its own kind of response. In one version that reached Gordon through a friend in Edinburgh, the story concluded with Gordon offering the man a consulting role, which was not true and made Gordon laugh in a way he had not expected when he heard it. What was consistent across every version was the sauce. The sauce was always right. The restraint, the 4 ingredients, and the cream that wasn't there. Patricia kept the recipe, such as it was, scrawled on the back of a ticket in her own hand after service that night. 4 ingredients, and a note that said simply no cream. She held it for 3 months, sitting in a folder in her office beneath the scheduling binders, and looked at it occasionally with the specific consideration she gave things she was not ready to decide about. Then she put it on the menu with a name that was not his name and that did not explain itself. Shallot and thyme, heritage carrots, reduced stock. Just the dish, the sauce, the 3 carrots. It became, without announcement, the most ordered item on her tasting menu, not because Patricia advertised it or placed it prominently on the card. Because people tasted it and went still in the way people go still when food does exactly what it is supposed to do and does not do anything else. She never changed it. Gordon flew back to London 3 days after the evening at Ember and Salt. His assistant noticed on the first morning back in his own kitchen that he stood at the pass longer than usual before service, looking at the plates going out. He did not say anything about it. He simply stood and looked, and occasionally reached over and removed an element from a plate, and said, "Send it." His sous chef of 9 years, a Scotsman named Duncan, who had worked through 2 restaurant openings with Gordon, and who understood every register of Gordon's silences, waited a week before asking. "Something changed," Duncan said. It was not a question. Gordon looked at him. "I stood in someone else's kitchen," he said. Duncan waited. "Someone cooked something very simple. 4 ingredients." Gordon looked at the pass. "I stood there knowing it was right before I tasted it, and I still stood there after. That does not happen very often." Duncan said, "Who was it?" Gordon was quiet for a moment. "Someone who hadn't earned it the hard way," he said. "That's what I kept thinking. And then I thought." He paused. "Maybe you don't have to earn it the hard way. Maybe that is just a story I tell myself, because the hard way is the only way I know." Duncan did not say anything. This was the correct response. Over the next 6 months, Gordon made 3 changes to his flagship tasting menu that his front-of-house team initially did not understand. He removed a component from the beef course that had been there for 4 years, a smoked bone marrow custard that was technically accomplished and universally praised in reviews. He simplified the amuse-bouche from a 4-element construction to a single item. He cut 1 course entirely from the 10-course progression, which reduced the average table time by 22 minutes and produced complaints from exactly no one. The menu received, at the next review cycle, a profile in a food publication whose critic described the current tasting experience as having achieved a new clarity, as if the kitchen has stopped trying to demonstrate what it is capable of and started trusting what it already knows. The critic meant it as a compliment. Gordon read it twice. Cora, the young server at Ember and Salt, who had explained the lamb sourcing and brought the mineral water and watched a man in a dark jacket tie an apron and walk behind the line, had been working at the restaurant for 14 months when that Saturday service happened. She was 26 years old and had been in front of housework for 4 years and had been thinking about culinary school for approximately as long, which meant she had been thinking about it seriously and not doing anything about it, which is the precise duration most people spend thinking about the thing they are going to do eventually. She did not post the 3 sentences in her journal anywhere, but she reread them the following week, and then the week after. The 3rd sentence was, "He asked permission before he touched the wine." She enrolled in the culinary program at Kendall College that January. She called Patricia first, because Patricia was the kind of person you called when you made a decision that mattered. Patricia said, "What took you so long?" Cora said she didn't know. "You do know," Patricia said, "but it doesn't matter now." A pause. "Finish the program. Then come back here and I'll teach you the rest." Cora finished the program in 18 months. She went back to Ember and Salt. She has been there for 2 years now, working the fish station on the line, learning at the pace of someone who has been paying attention for longer than she has officially been cooking. Patricia gives her the closing walk of the kitchen on Thursday nights, the solo survey of the pass that Gordon had always done alone, and that Patricia had done alone for 14 years. It is the way Patricia knows she trusts someone. The Thursday walk. Cora does it carefully and does not rush it. Gordon Ramsay, in an interview 3 years later that touched briefly on the question of what he considered the most important thing he had learned in 34 years of professional cooking, paused for a long time before answering. The interviewer, who had expected something about technique or discipline or the specific demands of maintaining 3 Michelin stars, waited, Gordon said. Restraint. Knowing what to leave out. He paused again. "I learned it late. Later than I should have." The interviewer asked, "What taught you?" Gordon looked at the table between them. He was quiet for a moment in the way he had been quiet in the back of the car to his hotel in Chicago 3 years before. "A plate," he said. "Someone put a plate on a pass in a kitchen in Chicago, and I tasted it. And I stood there for too long because I already knew everything on it was right." He paused. Sometimes that is the lesson. Somebody puts something down in front of you and you recognize it, and you realize you have been getting there your whole career, and someone else just arrived. He did not say whose plate it was. He did not have to. I have thought about that interview. I keep coming back to the thing Gordon said, that he had been getting there his whole career and someone else just arrived. I keep turning it over because I think there is something in it that goes past cooking. Most of us spend a very long time learning to add, learning to do more, say more, contribute more, fill space with everything we are capable of contributing. And then at some point, if we are paying attention, if we are honest about what we are actually looking at, we realize that the thing we have been working toward is not addition at all. It is the confidence to subtract, the knowledge of what to leave out. Gordon Ramsay spent 34 years earning that confidence. He earned it the hard way, through a childhood that taught him abundance was not a given, through kitchens that demanded everything he had, through 31 years of standing over a pass after service and measuring the distance between where he was and where he was trying to be. And one evening a man in worn jeans came into a dining room and demonstrated it in 45 minutes. I don't know what that means, exactly. I'm not sure it means anything that resolves cleanly. But I keep thinking about Gordon standing at the hotel window in Chicago, and I think what he was standing with was not resentment and not inadequacy. I think it was recognition. The best kind of recognition, the kind that costs something. This story is fictional, inspired by Gordon Ramsay's and Keanu Reeves's real-world reputations for, respectively, uncompromising professional standards and quiet, unglamorous depth. Drop something in the comments if a part of this stayed with you, not which part you liked, which part you're still thinking about. I am genuinely curious. If you know someone who has spent a long time getting somewhere and finally got there, share this with them. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe. There are more coming. See you in the next one.